This is the 5-minute guide to the USS Wichita, a unique heavy cruiser of the United States Navy.
The USS Wichita was a unique heavy cruiser and would be the last treaty-compliant heavy cruiser built by the United States Navy. Originally, she was to have been the 8th New Orleans class heavy cruiser. However, the United States Navy was not entirely happy with the design of the New Orleans. And since under the London Naval Treaty they only had one more heavy cruiser hull left to build, for a total of 18, they decided on a slightly different approach, taking the hull of the then new Brooklyn-class light cruiser and modifying it into the form of a heavy cruiser. The hull itself was slightly reworked to give the ship a higher freeboard and better stability, which was important for a ship operating over long distances in the ocean, and would carry significantly better protection with a maximum belt armour thickness of 6.4 inches, actually making it slightly better protected than the first battle cruisers. The ship was powered by 4 turbines, generating a total of 100,000 shaft horsepower, which got the ship through the water at a respectable speed of 33 knots. The main armament consisted, as was standard for American heavy cruisers at this point, of 9 8-inch guns in 3 triple turrets, a pair superfiring forward and a single turret aft. However, these turrets were new designs that rectified a lot of the problems that had been found in the New Orleans class turrets. Although the secondary battery was the same 8 5-inch guns as was on the Brooklyn class, the guns themselves were significantly superior, with the Brooklyns starting out using the 5-inch 25 caliber gun, whereas the Wichita introduced the classic 5-inch 38 caliber gun to United States cruisers for the first time. Additionally, compared to its Brooklyn-class ancestors, which had had all their secondary armament mounted on the sides for a total of 4 guns per side, the Wichita had 3 guns per side and 1 gun forward and 1 gun aft, allowing a maximum of 5 of the secondary battery guns to train on any given side, increasing its anti-aircraft firepower somewhat. Whilst the rest of the ship's anti-aircraft batteries started out as the standard smattering of 50 caliber machine guns, as was inevitable with all US ships in World War II, this changed completely during the actual course of the conflict. By the end of World War II, the American approach of sticking a gun literally everywhere they could physically bolt one to the deck resulted in a total light and medium anti-aircraft armament of 24 Bofors 40mm guns in 4 quadruple and 8 twin mounts, and 18 single Oerlikon 20mm cannons scattered all over the ship. However, all this armament and its associated fire control equipment was not without consequences. As with practically every American treaty-era cruiser, she completed overweight, and with very little room available for upgrades. In fact, at the time of launch, in order to keep her under the 10,000-ton limit, she'd only been given 2 of her 8 5-inch guns, and the installation of the rest of this armament once the naval treaties lapsed had also resulted in the need to install over 200 tons of ballast in the bottom of the ship to make sure she didn't become dangerously top-heavy. She entered service in 1939, just in time for World War II, and her initial service was mainly in the Atlantic. Before America's formal declaration of war on Germany and Italy, she actually partook in the operation that secured Iceland, and that indeed is where she was based on the day that war was actually declared. She would then spend most of 1942 on Arctic convoy escort duty, including a role in the escort of the ill-fated convoy PQ-17, therefore missing out only just on an opportunity to confront the Tirpitz and its escorts in a rather major battle. However, by August she had developed a problem with vibration in a propeller shaft, and repairs in the UK were ineffective, requiring her to return to the New York Navy Yard for repairs, which lasted a couple of weeks. She would return across the Atlantic to take part in Operation Torch, having a very busy time off Casablanca engaging Vichy French forces, including shore batteries, destroyers, and cruisers, sinking several ships and damaging more in company with USS Tuscaloosa. The greatest excitement included helping the USS Massachusetts engage the French battleship Jean Bart, and being hit by a medium-caliber shell from a French coastal defense battery, the latter of which would see her show up at the New York Navy Yard again for repairs for the second time within 3 months. She would then be transferred to the Pacific Theatre for operations in 1943 and onwards. She would get a very lucky break early on when, during the Battle of Rennell Island, the USS Chicago was hit by several torpedoes and sunk, while the Wichita was hit by a single torpedo, but very luckily it failed to explode. The Wichita would have a slightly more active role in the Pacific theatre than many American warships. Whilst a lot of the US Navy was tied up simply supporting amphibious operations, the Wichita took part in a number of raids and strikes on Japanese installations and other military targets, above and beyond the normal support for amphibious operations which she was also called upon for. Although amusingly, in July, whilst operating with the Idaho and the Mississippi, the somewhat new and untested radar picked up numerous unknown radar contacts, which the ships duly engaged, expending over 1,000 rounds of ammunition. It turned out after further examination that the radar returns had in fact been flocks of resting petrels that were migrating through the area. At the Battle of Leyte Gulf, although being assigned to the group that was decoyed north, she was released to finish off a number of ships that had been crippled by American carrier strikes, taking part in the sinking of the light carrier Chiyoda and the destroyer Hatsuzuki. This was followed by a return to port for more repairs to propeller shafts, as 2 of them had broken. She'd almost managed to make it through the Pacific War with minimal to no damage, when in April she shot down an incoming Kamikaze Zero, which clipped the deck before crashing into the sea, which was followed up later in the month by a friendly fire incident when somebody shot her with a 5-inch shell. Fortunately, that would be about the closest she came to major damage, and she would round out the war with 13 battle stars. The rest of her career was relatively short. Although she was one of the first major warships to reach Japan, she was then dragooned into Operation Magic Carpet along with most of the rest of the American fleet, and then laid up in Philadelphia in 1947. Although she had given good service, the proliferation of additional anti-aircraft armament, fire control systems and radar during World War II had seen her become badly overloaded along with the other American treaty cruisers, and the much larger Baltimore and Beyond heavy cruisers were simply much more capable ships for the post-war environment. Therefore, although she was considered for conversion into a guided missile cruiser, she was stricken from the Naval Register and sold for scrap at the end of the 1950s.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to tag your question with Q&A if you want to leave a question for the dry dock.